The shaky smartphone footage captures the confrontation in stark clarity, viewer count climbing as the live stream spreads. "You need to leave. Now!" Harsh diner lighting casts shadows across the scene where a police officer looms over two elderly black veterans, pointing at the door. The diner falls silent as Officer Thomas blocks the food delivery to their table. Patrons stare, some uncomfortable, others pretending not to notice. When one veteran moves too slowly, Thomas grabs his cane. "Is there a reason we're being removed, officer?" The veteran's voice remains steady despite the humiliation burning in his eyes. Thomas straightens his uniform. "Management's discretion. Don't make this difficult." The second veteran slowly rises, joints creaking with age. "We fought for this country, son." "Sure you did." Thomas sneers. "Keep moving." The phone recording zooms in on a third man at the counter, silently watching the scene unfold, his expression darkening as he reaches for his own phone. Morning light streams through the windows of Liberty Grill, a small-town diner nestled in a predominantly white neighborhood. The breakfast rush brings a mix of customers, though an invisible pattern emerges in where people sit. Samuel Jenkins and Leroy Williams, both in their 70s, push open the glass door, their veteran caps adorned with service pins that catch the light. "Morning, gentlemen," calls a young waitress, Alicia, her smile genuine as she grabs two menus. "Your usual booth?" Before they can answer, the new manager, a thin man with perpetually narrowed eyes, intercepts. "Actually, we're pretty full today. How about the table by the kitchen?" Samuel and Leroy exchange glances. Their usual booth sits empty, its surface recently wiped clean. "Sure thing," Samuel says, his dignified bearing unchanged as they follow Alicia to the less desirable table where dish noise and kitchen heat will be their companions. At the counter, Officer Thomas Hayes sips coffee in his partial uniform, eyeing the veteran's arrival. His cousin, the manager, leans over. "Getting all kinds of elements in here these days," he mutters. Thomas nods. "Gotta keep the place respectable." Neither man notices Robert Chandler, a well-dressed black man in his 60s, observing from his seat at the counter. He opens his laptop, occasionally glancing toward the veterans' table. Alicia brings water with extra lemon, just how they like it. "I'll be right back for your order, gentlemen." As she walks away, the manager brushes past her, accidentally bumping her arm. Water splashes across the floor near the veterans' table. "Sorry about that," he says without sounding sorry at all. "We'll clean it up eventually." Thomas's police radio crackles with news about a VIP convoy arriving in town for a military ceremony as his cousin whispers something that makes Thomas glance back at the veterans with newfound irritation. "The usual, Alicia?" Samuel asks, his weathered hands folded patiently on the table. "Coffee, black for me, Earl Grey for Leroy, and 2 breakfast specials." "You got it." Alicia scribbles the order. "How's your granddaughter doing at college, Mr. Leroy?" Leroy's face brightens. "Dean's List again. That girl's smarter than both of us put together." Samuel chuckles. "Ain't that the truth?" The conversation drifts to family and community as Alicia heads to the kitchen, slip in hand. The manager intercepts her, takes the order, and promptly slides it beneath others. 30 minutes pass. Tables filled after them receive steaming plates while Samuel and Leroy's cups empty. White patrons who arrived later eat contentedly. Leroy raises his hand politely when Alicia passes with loaded plates for another table. "Miss, any word on our breakfast? Been about half an hour now." The manager swoops in before Alicia can respond. "Order? What order?" His voice is deliberately slow, condescending. "I don't recall you gentlemen placing an order." "We most certainly did," Samuel states calmly. "Miss Alicia took it herself." "You must be confused." The manager's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Perhaps at your age, memory gets a little unreliable. Samuel reaches for his wallet, produces the receipt Alicia gave them. "Our order, time stamped 35 minutes ago." The manager barely glances at it. This must be for someone else. We're very busy today. Officer Thomas approaches, hand casually resting near his holstered weapon. Everything all right over here, Frank? These gentlemen causing trouble? Just a misunderstanding, the manager replies. They seem confused about ordering. Alicia steps forward. Actually, I took their order myself. Alicia, we need you in the back. Now! The manager's tone leaves no room for argument. Throughout the diner, conversations quiet as heads turn toward the confrontation. Some patrons shift uncomfortably, others studiously look away. At the counter, Robert positions his phone discreetly, the recording app active and aimed at the unfolding scene. As Samuel reaches inside his jacket pocket for his wallet, Thomas's hand moves to his weapon and he barks, "Keep your hands where I can see them." The restaurant falls silent. Forks freeze midway to mouths. A child whispers to her mother and is immediately shushed. "I'm just reaching for my ID," Samuel explains, voice steady despite the officer's aggressive stance. "Slowly then," Thomas commands, making no effort to lower his voice. "Let everyone see what you're doing." Samuel carefully extracts his wallet, movements deliberate under the collective gaze of the diner's patrons. The leather is worn but well-maintained, like the man himself. "These gentlemen were becoming agitated," the manager announces to the room, "threatening my staff when their food was delayed." "That's not true," Leroy protests, his dignity intact despite the public accusation. "We simply asked about our order." Thomas ignores him. "IDs. Both of you." He holds out his hand expectantly. Samuel passes his driver's license and veteran ID. Leroy does the same, his hands slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the controlled anger of a man who's faced worse and survived. Thomas examines Samuel's ID, then deliberately lets Leroy's card slip from his fingers. It lands face down beside Leroy's shoe. "Pick it up," Thomas orders. Leroy stares at him, military bearing evident in his straight spine. "Officer, I have a hip replacement from a combat injury. Bending isn't easy for me." "I said pick it up." Thomas's voice hardens. "Or should I assume you're refusing to comply with an officer's directive?" With painful slowness, Leroy braces himself against the table and reaches down, face tightening as pain shoots through his hip. He retrieves his ID with trembling fingers. "Stand up, both of you." Thomas makes a show of radioing in to check for warrants. "Empty your pockets onto the table." "Is this really necessary, officer?" Samuel asks quietly. "Do it now, or we can continue this conversation at the station." With silent dignity, they comply. Samuel places his keys, handkerchief, and a small notebook on the table. Leroy adds a pocket watch, reading glasses, and a worn photograph. Thomas picks up the photo. Leroy in uniform decades ago, standing beside fellow soldiers. "Halloween costume party?" He smirks, turning to the manager. "See these pins they're wearing? You can buy this stuff at any Army surplus store." At the counter, Robert speaks softly into his phone. "General, we have a situation. Liberty Diner, 2 of our own." "Yes, sir, immediately." The manager steps forward. "I think it's best if you gentlemen leave. We reserve the right to refuse service." Alicia emerges from the kitchen carrying 2 breakfast plates. "Their food is ready." The manager blocks her path. "They're banned from the establishment. Take those back." Around them, a few patrons record the scene on their phones. Most look away, uncomfortable witnesses to injustice but unwilling to intervene. As the veterans slowly gather their belongings, Leroy winces in pain, clutching his hip where an old combat injury flares up, and Samuel whispers, "Not here, Lee. Not today." Outside Liberty Grill, morning sunshine feels like a mockery. Samuel gently supports Leroy as they make their way to their modest sedan, parked in the handicapped space with the proper placard displayed. "You all right, Lee?" Samuel asks, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. Leroy nods stiffly, blinking rapidly to dispel the moisture gathering in his eyes. Ain't the first time, won't be the last. His voice wavers slightly. Just thought those days were behind us. Samuel helps him into the passenger seat before walking around to the driver's side. Once inside, his composed facade cracks momentarily. His hands grip the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. Colonel Howard didn't raise us to accept this, Samuel says finally, invoking their former commanding officer. And we won't. Leroy straightens in his seat. The right way. By the book. By the book, Samuel agrees. They clasp hands briefly, a silent vow between warriors who've faced worse battles. A tap on the window startles them. Robert Chandler stands outside, holding up his credentials. Samuel rolls down the window cautiously. Gentlemen, Robert Chandler, retired JAG officer. I witnessed what happened in there. May I join you? Inside the diner, Thomas and the manager exchange triumphant looks as they watch the veteran's car. That'll teach them to know their place, the manager says, high-fiving his cousin. Thomas chuckles. Did you see the look on the old one's face when I dropped his ID? Priceless. In Samuel's car, Robert is already making calls. This is Chandler. I need to speak with General Hayes immediately. Matter of discrimination against decorated veterans. He pauses, listening. Yes, Pentagon authorization. And contact Mayor Simmons. This happened in his town. Meanwhile, Samuel dials the community center. Director Evans? Samuel Jenkins here. Leroy and I won't make it to mentor the kids today. He explains the situation succinctly. Those boys deserve to know why real-world battles don't always involve weapons, Leroy adds when Samuel puts the call on speaker. Back at the diner, Alicia stands before the manager, apron in hand. I quit. What you did was illegal and immoral. You quit. You're blacklisted from every restaurant in town, the manager threatens. My cousin has connections. Alicia's chin lifts. Then I'll work somewhere with actual human decency. She tosses her apron onto the counter and walks out. Above the register, a security camera silently records, not just today's incident, but a pattern. Footage shows the manager repeatedly seating minorities by the kitchen, losing their orders, providing slower service. In Robert's car, now parked several blocks away, he makes his final call of the morning. Senator Williams, Robert Chandler. About that accountability initiative we discussed. Yes, I believe we need to make an example of this one. The president would want to know about this. Robert ends his final call with, Yes, Senator, I believe we need to make an example of this one. The president would want to know about this. The next morning, Liberty Grill hums with unusual energy. Veterans of all ages and races occupy nearly every table. Some wear full uniform. Others display only caps or pins identifying their service branches. They converse quietly, drinking coffee, a coordinated presence impossible to ignore. Officer Thomas pushes through the door for his usual pre-shift breakfast, faltering momentarily at the scene. His confident stride diminishes as he makes his way to the counter, conscious of the veteran's measured gazes tracking his movement. The manager emerges from the kitchen, face paling as he absorbs the silent statement filling his restaurant. He approaches Thomas, leaning in to whisper, What the hell is happening? Thomas shrugs, feigning nonchalance. Probably some veterans meeting in town. Just serve them and they'll leave. The bell above the door chimes again. A woman enters, press credentials visible, notebook in hand. She scans the room before approaching the counter. Officer Hayes, I'm Sidney Chen from the Tribune. I'd like to ask about yesterday's incident with 2 decorated veterans. We received multiple videos of the confrontation. Thomas straightens, hand instinctively resting near his badge. There was no incident, just some disruptive customers who were asked to leave. Standard procedure. Interesting, Sidney replies, pulling out her phone. Because the live stream that went viral overnight tells a different story. Over 200,000 views since yesterday. The manager drops a coffee mug. It shatters against the tile, coffee splashing his pant leg. No one moves to help him clean up. Thomas's radio crackles. Officer Hayes, report to the station immediately. Chief wants to see you. The dispatcher's voice sounds unusually formal. The manager retreats to his office, phone vibrating constantly with notifications. His face drains of color as he scrolls through dozens of one-star reviews mentioning discrimination, veterans, and calls for boycott. Across town, Samuel and Leroy sit in Samuel's modest living room, watching the local morning news. Their encounter plays on screen, captured from multiple angles, reporters discussing disturbing allegations of discrimination against respected community members. The doorbell rings. Samuel rises to answer it, revealing Robert Chandler standing on the porch, briefcase in hand and a determined expression on his face. "Gentlemen," he says, holding up a folder of documents, "Phase 1 is complete. Ready to discuss our next steps?" The police chief's face darkens as he slides a folder across his desk to Thomas, saying, "Do you have any idea who you just harassed? Their military files just came across my desk." "I was maintaining order, Chief." Thomas leans back in the chair, arms crossed defensively. "Those two were disruptive. My cousin called me over to help." Chief Rivera's expression remains stony. "Disruptive how exactly?" "They were arguing about their order, making the waitress uncomfortable." "The waitress who quit in protest of their treatment?" The chief taps the folder. "The same waitress who gave a statement this morning saying they were unfailingly polite?" Thomas shifts uncomfortably. "She's young. Doesn't understand how these situations can escalate." "And you do?" Chief Rivera opens the folder, revealing printed screenshots from Thomas's body camera footage. "Because I'm looking at a pattern here, Hayes. Traffic stops, 3 times more likely to search minority drivers. Noise complaints, consistently harsher warnings to certain households." "That's selective interpretation," Thomas protests. "Is it?" The chief's voice hardens. "The mayor's office has received 17 calls since last night. The VFW, American Legion, and 3 military advocacy groups are demanding an investigation." Across town, the manager's phone rings. The franchise owner's name flashes on screen. "Corporate is receiving complaints by the hundreds," the owner barks without preamble. "Discrimination against veterans? What the hell were you thinking?" "It wasn't about them being veterans," the manager stammers. "They were being difficult. Save it. I'm sending a representative today. Your franchise license is under review." Throughout downtown, store windows display hastily printed signs. "All veterans welcome, and we support those who served." The community response is swift, decisive. At City Hall, the mayor calls an emergency council meeting. "This isn't just about public relations," he explains to the assembled members. "It's about who we are as a community." Back at the police station, Thomas meets with his union representative in a conference room. "They can't prove discrimination," Thomas insists. The representative sighs. "Multiple videos, witness statements, and a documented pattern in your record suggest otherwise. My advice? Apologize before this gets worse." Thomas slams his fist on the table. "Apologize? For doing my job? This is reverse discrimination, plain and simple." Meanwhile, the station's front desk is overwhelmed with calls. The dispatcher covers the receiver. "Chief, it's the Pentagon. Again. 3rd military office to call today." Robert receives a text with attached document. "Pentagon authorization granted. Operation Respect commencing at 0900 tomorrow." Morning light slants through the Venetian blinds of the police station as Thomas arrives for his shift. The usual camaraderie is noticeably absent. Fellow officers glance up briefly before returning to their work, conversations dying as he passes. "Hayes," the desk sergeant calls. "Chief wants you on desk duty until further notice." "Desk duty?" Thomas stops mid-stride. "On what grounds?" "Pending investigation." The sergeant doesn't meet his eyes. "Computers set up in the back office." In the break room, Thomas pours coffee while 2 officers discuss the upcoming community forum. They fall silent when he enters. "Don't stop on my account," Thomas says sharply. Officer Rodriguez hesitates. "Look, man, you put us all in a bad position. Those vets are respected community members. So now we're policing based on popularity? Thomas scoffs. No, we're policing with respect for all citizens, Rodriguez replies, gathering his things. Something you might want to consider. At Liberty Grill, the franchise owner confronts the manager personally, corporate lawyer in tow. 17 discrimination complaints in 6 months, all on your watch, the owner says, slapping a document on the counter. All following the same pattern. I was maintaining the restaurant's atmosphere, the manager defends weakly. By segregating customers, creating a hostile environment for minorities? The lawyer opens her portfolio. The civil liabilities alone could bankrupt this location. Across town, at Westside Elementary, Principal Goodwin makes a difficult call. I'm sorry, Chief Rivera, but we're canceling the police department's safety presentation this week. She pauses. Given recent events, parents have expressed concerns about Officer Hayes' involvement. He wasn't scheduled to present, the chief explains. I understand, but until this situation is resolved, we need to respect our community's wishes. Later that afternoon, Thomas's wife calls him at the station. Tommy, the kids are getting questions at school. Her voice is strained. Olivia says no one would sit with her at lunch today. What's happening? Thomas grips the phone tighter. Political correctness gone mad is what's happening. I did my job, and now everyone's acting like I'm the criminal. Meanwhile, at the community center, Samuel and Leroy enter to thunderous applause. Veterans, students, and community members rise to their feet in solidarity. The mayor himself escorts them to the front row. Don't make a fuss now, Samuel says, embarrassed by the attention. Local news cameras capture the moment as the center's director announces a formal press conference scheduled for the following day. Prominent military officials will be in attendance, she explains, to address recent events and recognize distinguished service. In his hotel room, Robert Chandler reviews documents on his laptop when his phone chimes with a message. He opens the attachment, official Pentagon letterhead visible at the top, and smiles grimly. A military convoy with government plates pulls into town as the veterans prepare for their press conference, a flag-covered case carefully removed from the lead vehicle. Town Hall reaches capacity an hour before the scheduled press conference. Journalists from regional and national outlets set up cameras and microphones. Military officials in full dress uniform stand at attention near the podium. The room buzzes with anticipation. Officer Thomas and his manager cousin are escorted to front row seats by grim-faced deputies, not as guests of honor, but as required attendees by direct order of their superiors. This is ridiculous, Thomas mutters, making a mountain out of a molehill. The manager doesn't respond, his eyes fixed on the corporate representative watching them from across the room. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Mayor Simmons approaches the podium. The room falls silent. Today, we address an incident that has caused pain in our community, the mayor begins. But more importantly, we recognize 2 men whose extraordinary service to this nation has gone unacknowledged for too long in their hometown. The side door opens. Samuel and Leroy enter, dressed in suits adorned with a few modest service pins. They move with quiet dignity to their seats near the podium. Before we hear from our guests of honor, I'd like to introduce Robert Chandler. Robert approaches the podium, his bearing unmistakably military despite his civilian clothes. For those who don't know me, I'm retired General Robert Chandler, former judge, advocate general, and Pentagon senior advisor. His revelation sends murmurs through the crowd. What you witnessed at Liberty Grill wasn't just about 2 veterans being disrespected. It was about 2 national treasures being treated as less than citizens in the country they helped shape. A projector screen descends behind him. With the declassification approved yesterday by the Secretary of Defense, I can now share what few outside top military circles know. The screen illuminates with a black and white photograph, a younger Samuel in combat fatigues receiving a medal from President Kennedy. Samuel Jenkins, Special Forces, reconnaissance specialist behind enemy lines in conflicts most Americans never knew existed. Robert's voice fills the silent room. Recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor for an operation that saved over 300 American lives. The details remain classified, but the president called it the most extraordinary display of courage I've witnessed. The image changes to Samuel in a Pentagon briefing room with 3 different presidents across the decades. Mr. Jenkins has advised every administration since Kennedy on specialized military operations. His protocols for high-risk extractions are still taught at West Point. Thomas shifts uncomfortably in his seat as Robert continues. And Leroy Williams. The screen shows a younger Leroy at a military computer bank. Pioneer in tactical communications and cryptography. Developed encryption systems that prevented Soviet interception of critical intelligence. His work directly contributed to successful operations during our nation's most tense Cold War moments. New images appear. Leroy receiving commendations, shaking hands with generals, standing beside NASA officials. Mr. Williams's innovations saved countless operatives behind enemy lines. When astronauts needed secure communications during the height of the space race, they used his systems. The screen displays both men in the Oval Office receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Both men still consult on classified operations. Both maintain top-level security clearances. Both have served this country with distinction for over 50 years. Military officials in the audience stand at attention, rendering solemn salutes to the 2 elderly men. Thomas stares at the floor, face ashen. Beside him, the manager tugs nervously at his collar, sweat beading on his forehead. Yesterday, Robert continues, I received calls from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 3 former defense secretaries, and the president, all expressing outrage at how these national heroes were treated in their hometown. A video plays on screen, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs speaking directly to camera. Samuel Jenkins saved my father's unit in '68, the 4-star general states. Leroy Williams's communications system got critical intelligence to us during Desert Storm. These men aren't just veterans, they're legends. Robert gestures to a group of teenagers seated behind Samuel and Leroy. These young people are from the mentorship program these gentlemen run. Future leaders learning from 2 of America's finest. One young man steps forward, voice steady despite the cameras. Mr. Samuel and Mr. Leroy never told us they were heroes. They just taught us dignity, respect, and service. Every week, without fail. As the teenagers each share brief testimonials, Thomas stares at the men he'd humiliated, seeing them, truly seeing them, for the first time. Samuel rises slowly, moving to the podium with the same quiet dignity he's carried his entire life. He locks eyes with Thomas. Son, we faced worse than you in defense of the very rights you tried to deny us. As the truth of their service emerges, Samuel locks eyes with Thomas and says quietly, Son, we've faced worse than you in defense of the very rights you tried to deny us. The franchise owner of Liberty Grill stands before a hastily arranged press conference, corporate executives flanking him on either side. Behind them, a banner announces the restaurant's new name, Veterans Table. Effective immediately, the manager responsible has been terminated, the owner announces, voice firm. His actions violated not only our company policies, but fundamental human decency. The corporate CEO steps forward. Beginning next week, all 15,000 employees across our restaurant chain will undergo mandatory bias training. This isn't a one-time response. It's a commitment to ensuring this never happens again anywhere in our organization. Across town, Chief Rivera addresses assembled officers, Thomas seated apart from his colleagues. Officer Hayes has been placed on unpaid administrative leave pending completion of our investigation. The chief's expression is grave. Additionally, we're implementing a comprehensive review of all officer conduct over the past 18 months. Officers exchange glances. This isn't just about Thomas anymore. Every arrest, every citation, every interaction will be examined for patterns of bias, Rivera continues. This department serves everyone equally, or it doesn't serve me as its chief. At the state capitol, the Attorney General announces a formal civil rights investigation. Discrimination is not just morally wrong, it's illegal, she states firmly. Whether wearing a uniform, a business suit, or veteran's cap, every citizen deserves equal treatment under the law. Back in town, local business owners gather at the Chamber of Commerce. Starting today, all member businesses will implement a Veterans Priority Program, the president announces. Special accommodation for service members, identification of veteran-friendly establishments, and zero tolerance for discrimination. Mayor Simmons takes the podium next. I'm establishing a community oversight committee to review allegations of discrimination in public accommodations. He gestures to the audience. Samuel Jenkins has agreed to serve as co-chair. Seated nearby, Samuel nods solemnly, not seeking the spotlight, but unwilling to refuse the responsibility. At corporate headquarters, the restaurant chain's board approves a substantial new initiative. The Jenkins-Williams Culinary Scholarship will provide full tuition for minority youth interested in restaurant management or culinary arts, the chairwoman announces. 5 recipients annually, with guaranteed internships across our properties. In the police department's records room, 2 state investigators methodically review body camera footage from Thomas's previous arrests. Subject described as suspicious, despite no observable suspicious behavior, one notes, documenting timestamp 2347 on a traffic stop from 3 months prior. Probable cause for search questionable at best. Her colleague nods grimly. Patterns becoming clear. Minority subjects consistently subjected to additional scrutiny, longer detainments, more aggressive language. Community members begin coming forward with their own experiences. A local barber describes being followed through a department store. A doctor recounts being pulled over 3 times in 1 month without citations. A high school teacher tells of customers at Liberty Grill always being seated near restrooms. The manager's employment history reveals similar patterns at previous restaurants. Complaints filed but never addressed. Explanations accepted without investigation. In Robert Chandler's temporary office at the federal building, he outlines the legal consequences to the mayor and city attorney. Violation of civil rights under color of authority carries significant penalties, he explains. When those rights belong to decorated veterans with active security clearances, additional federal statutes come into play. The city attorney winces. What's the exposure for the municipality? Substantial, Robert replies, but this isn't about money. It's about systemic change. Meanwhile, corporate headquarters calls Alicia with an unexpected offer. We've reviewed the incident reports and witness statements, the HR director explains. Your integrity impressed us. We'd like to offer you a position in our management training program. Alicia sits stunned, phone pressed to her ear. I don't have a college degree, she admits. Character can't be taught in classrooms, the director responds. We need people like you setting the example. Thomas cleans out his desk under supervision, placing personal items in a cardboard box. Fellow officers pass without acknowledging him. This isn't fair, he mutters. 20 years on the force and they're treating me like a criminal. The supervising sergeant remains professional but distant. Actions have consequences, Hayes. We all take an oath to protect and serve, all citizens, not just the ones who look like us. Thomas's phone rings, an unknown Washington, D.C. number. He answers cautiously. Officer Thomas Hayes, this is the Secretary of Defense. We need to discuss your interaction with 2 of our most valuable assets. Thomas sinks into his chair, the full weight of his actions finally beginning to register. At the Veterans Affairs office, Samuel and Leroy meet with administrators to address broader concerns. This incident has exposed something larger, Samuel explains. How many other veterans face discrimination without having generals to call? Leroy nods. We've got a platform now. Responsibility to use it right. The VA director agrees. We're establishing a direct reporting system for veterans experiencing discrimination. with legal support available when needed. That evening, news vans remain parked outside Thomas's home. His children peer through blinds at reporters waiting for statements. "Daddy, why are those people saying bad things about you?" his daughter asks, confusion in her young eyes. Thomas has no answer that doesn't expose his shame. For the first time, he begins to understand the true magnitude of his failure, not just as an officer, but as the example his children follow. In the quiet of Samuel's living room, he and Leroy watch the continuing coverage. "Think anything will really change, Sam?" Leroy asks. Samuel considers the question. Some things will, some won't. But those kids at the center, they're seeing justice in action. That matters. Robert arrives with updated documents. The department's internal investigation is expanding. Looks like Hayes wasn't the only officer with troubling patterns. "It's never just one person," Samuel sighs. "Systems enable behavior." Robert nods. "Which is why the federal oversight will continue for minimum 3 years. Patterns take time to change." As Thomas cleans out his locker at the police station, his phone rings with an unknown Washington, D.C. number, and a voice says, "Officer Thomas, this is the Secretary of Defense. We need to discuss your interaction with 2 of our most valuable assets." The disciplinary hearing convenes in the municipal building's largest conference room. Morning light filters through blinds, casting striped shadows across solemn faces. The 5-person panel, 2 senior officers, a city attorney, a civilian oversight representative, and Chief Rivera, sit behind a curved table. Thomas occupies a solitary chair facing them. "This hearing will determine appropriate disciplinary action regarding Officer Thomas Hayes," Chief Rivera begins. "We'll hear testimony from community members, review evidence, and provide Officer Hayes opportunity to address the allegations." Thomas straightens his tie, jaw tight. His union representative sits nearby, expression grim after reviewing the evidence. Community members approach the microphone one by one. A black business owner describes being followed through his own store when Thomas responded to a false alarm. An elderly Hispanic woman recounts Thomas addressing her adult son as boy during a minor traffic stop. A Middle Eastern doctor details 3 vehicle searches in a month without citations. Each incident in isolation might be explained away, the civilian oversight representative notes. Together, they establish a pattern. The technical expert plays synchronized footage from Thomas's body camera, dispatch recordings, and Liberty Grill's security system. The evidence is damning, not just in what Thomas did, but in the casual confidence with which he did it. "Officer Hayes," Chief Rivera asks, "did you suggest to your cousin that certain customers should be discouraged from dining at Liberty Grill?" "That's taking things out of context," Thomas protests. "Please answer the question directly." Thomas shifts uncomfortably. "We discussed maintaining the restaurant's atmosphere. That's all." The manager, called as a witness, crumbles under questioning. "Thomas said the restaurant would attract a better clientele if we made certain people uncomfortable enough not to return." His voice wavers. "He suggested selective service delays, seating arrangements, even calling him if people complained so he could intimidate them officially." "That's a lie!" Thomas stands, face flushed. "Sit down, Officer Hayes," Chief Rivera orders. "Body camera footage from March 12th records you telling your cousin, and I quote, 'Some folks need to be reminded of their place.' Would you care to explain what you meant?" Thomas stares at the table, silent. His union representative leans over. "The evidence is overwhelming. If you want any chance of salvaging something, show remorse." The afternoon progresses with technical experts demonstrating statistical anomalies in Thomas's enforcement patterns. His traffic stops of minority drivers exceed department averages by 340%. His use of force incidents show similar disparities. When the police union representative takes the stand, Thomas's last hope dissolves. "The union exists to protect officers from unjust accusations and ensure due process," he states. "After reviewing evidence in this case, we cannot in good conscience provide further representation to Officer Hayes." His actions violate both his oath and our code of conduct. By late afternoon, Thomas finally addresses the panel. I recognize that my actions have caused concern, he begins, voice hollow, reading from notes his attorney prepared. I apologize to those who felt disrespected by my conduct. The civilian oversight representative leans forward. Do you understand why your actions were wrong, Officer Hayes? Not just unpopular or politically incorrect, fundamentally wrong? Thomas's response focuses entirely on the consequences to his career. Not once does he acknowledge the human impact of his behavior. The panel deliberates for 30 minutes before delivering their verdict. Thomas Hayes, your employment with this police department is terminated, effective immediately, Chief Rivera announces. Your pension benefits will be reduced according to department regulations regarding termination for cause. Your case has been referred to the district attorney for consideration of criminal charges related to civil rights violations. You are required to complete 200 hours of community service with veteran organizations. The manager receives his own judgment shortly after, civil penalties totaling $25,000 and permanent disqualification from food service management positions within the state. As the hearing concludes, Samuel approaches Thomas in the hallway. Thomas braces for recrimination, but Samuel's expression holds something more complex than anger. Your real punishment isn't losing your badge. It's living with the knowledge of who you really are, Samuel says quietly. But redemption starts today, if you're brave enough to change. As the hearing concludes, Samuel approaches Thomas and says, Your real punishment isn't losing your badge. It's living with the knowledge of who you really are. But redemption starts today, if you're brave enough to change. 3 months after the incident, Chief Rivera stands before the graduating class of the police academy. Behind him, a banner proclaims, Protect, Serve, Respect in bold letters. Today, you join a department transformed, he tells the cadets. Your training included 40 additional hours of bias recognition and community engagement, direct results of lessons we learned the hard way. The police department's new training protocols, developed with input from Samuel and Leroy, become a model adopted by neighboring counties. Scenario-based exercises replace theoretical discussions. Officers regularly rotate through community service assignments in diverse neighborhoods. At the restaurant chain's headquarters, a newly created position makes headlines. Chief Diversity Officer, responsible for ensuring inclusive practices across all locations. This isn't window dressing, the CEO explains during the press conference. This position has authority to implement change at every level of our organization. Downtown, storefronts display uniform placards in their windows. Discrimination-free zone with the city seal and reporting hotline prominently featured. Business owners attend monthly workshops on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. In the high school, curriculum changes bring veterans' stories into history classes, not just tales of battlefield heroism, but the often overlooked contributions of minority service members throughout American conflicts. History isn't just what's in textbooks, the district superintendent explains at a school board meeting. It's also the stories we choose to elevate or ignore. Weekly community dialogue sessions at the public library address uncomfortable questions about systemic bias. Attendance grows steadily, conversations becoming more nuanced with each gathering. Robert Chandler establishes the Veteran Equity Foundation with initial funding from corporate donors and private philanthropists. Its mission: identifying and addressing discrimination against veterans, with special focus on minority service members. Discrimination doesn't end when the uniform comes off, Robert explains during the foundation's launch. Sometimes, that's when it intensifies. The foundation provides legal support, public education, and advocacy at both local and national levels. Samuel and Leroy serve as inaugural board members, their experiences informing the foundation's priorities. At the State Police Academy graduation, Samuel and Leroy receive standing ovations when introduced as guest speakers. Your badge isn't power, Samuel tells the graduates. It's responsibility. Remember that distinction every day you wear it. The community center where Samuel and Leroy mentor expands its programming, creating structured opportunities for veterans to share their expertise with young people. The waiting list for youth participants grows exponentially. In the state legislature, representatives introduced the Veterans Dignity Act, establishing enhanced penalties for discrimination against service members and requiring businesses to implement specific accommodations. This isn't special treatment, the bill's sponsor clarifies during committee hearings. It's recognition of special sacrifice. National media outlets run feature stories exploring the intersection of race and military service, sparking conversations in communities far beyond the small town where it all began. The City Council passes an ordinance requiring security cameras in all public establishments, with footage retention requirements and accessibility protocols for investigative purposes. Sunshine is the best disinfectant, the mayor explains during the signing ceremony. Accountability requires evidence. 6 months after losing his badge, Thomas approaches the community center, hand hesitating before knocking on the door. 6 months later, a nervous Thomas approaches the community center where Samuel and Leroy mentor youth, hand hesitating before knocking on the door. 1 year later, morning light once again streams through the windows of the diner, now renamed Heroes Haven. Photographs line the walls, veterans of all races in uniform, their service years and branches noted beneath each image. The centerpiece display features Samuel and Leroy in their youth, standing tall in crisp military dress. The bell chimes as Samuel and Leroy enter, moving at the unhurried pace of men who've earned the right to take their time. Alicia greets them from behind the counter, now wearing an assistant manager's name tag. "Your usual table is ready, gentlemen," she says warmly, leading them to the best booth by the window. The diner hums with diverse conversation. A group of firefighters shares breakfast with city council members. High school students interview a Vietnam veteran for a history project. The atmosphere feels open, welcoming. "Coffee's on the house," Alicia says, placing steaming mugs before them. "Corporate's orders. Medal of Honor recipients don't pay for coffee." Samuel chuckles. "Told you we should have worn disguises, Lee." From the kitchen emerges a familiar face. Thomas, now in server's attire rather than a police uniform. He approaches their table carrying plates of breakfast, movements measured, expression complex. "Gentlemen," he says, placing their meals before them with care. "Belgian waffles with fresh berries for Mr. Williams. Denver omelet for Mr. Jenkins." The transformation isn't just in his position, but in his bearing. The arrogance replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. He meets their eyes without flinching, a man facing the consequences of his actions daily. "Thank you, Thomas," Samuel says simply. Thomas nods, stepping back. "Let me know if you need anything else." Across town, the former manager stocks shelves at a small grocery store. His name tag reads trainee despite his age. Each day brings lessons in humility and service. At City Hall, the mayor hosts representatives from 3 neighboring states, sharing details of the Community Oversight Committee's success. Samuel's leadership has transformed the initiative from crisis response to proactive engagement. Complaints of discrimination dropped 63% in the first year, the mayor explains. Not because incidents went unreported, but because they actually decreased. Back at Heroes Haven, Thomas returns to refill coffee cups. "My son's scout troop is doing that Veterans History project," he says hesitantly. "They were hoping you might speak at their meeting next week." Leroy studies him for a moment. "You'll be there?" "Yes, sir. I help with the troop now. Part of trying to be better." Samuel nods. "Then we'll be there too." Later, the veterans walk through the community center where teenagers gather for their weekly mentoring session. Among the adult volunteers stands Thomas, awkward but committed, helping a young man with a woodworking project. Robert joins them, reviewing the latest expansion of his foundation's work. 7 states have adopted the Veterans Dignity Act. Federal legislation is in committee. Progress comes slowly, Leroy observes, watching the young people work together. But it comes, Samuel adds, his voice carrying the weight of a man who's seen enough history to maintain perspective. As the afternoon session ends, Samuel addresses the gathered youth. His message is simple, yet profound. Hate is heavy, he tells them, voice gentle but firm. Carrying it will break you eventually. We've seen it consume good people, turn them into shadows of themselves. The strongest thing you can do, the bravest thing, is to set it down. The teenagers listen with rare attention, witnessing in these elderly men a dignity no humiliation could diminish, a strength no discrimination could weaken. True heroes are measured not by the battles they've won, Samuel concludes, but by the dignity with which they face injustice. If you've been moved by Samuel and Leroy's journey, take a moment to hit that subscribe button on Beat Stories. We bring you authentic narratives of justice, resilience, and transformation that mainstream media often overlooks. Remember to like this video and share it with someone who needs to see that accountability is possible. Each share extends this important conversation to new communities and potential allies. Our comment section is a place for respectful discussion and shared experiences. We maintain strict community guidelines to ensure all voices can be heard with dignity. To all veterans watching, your service matters, your dignity matters, your stories matter, and Beat Stories is committed to amplifying them. As Samuel reminds us, change doesn't come from revenge. It comes from refusing to let injustice stand unchallenged. Join our growing Beat Stories family by subscribing now and be part of that change.
Sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't come with noise, just one person standing their ground. At Beat Stories, we highlight those moments that shift the balance. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, because every week we bring real stories that shake the system.